Hey everyone, welcome back to the Book Barn. I'm Lasha.
And I'm Lanie, and today's episode, Lasha, is going to be a wild one.
We are going to be calling one of our original guests. That's right, he was here way back with us in the early days before we even figured out how to run our equipment.
That is so true.
So Lanie, let's get your son, Dr. Shane Hammer, on the line.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Shane.
Hey.
Last time you were here, we talked about a Stephen King short story collection, but what have you been reading since then?
Yeah, I guess it's been almost a year since I was on the podcast with you guys. Really, I haven't had a ton of time to read for enjoyment, to be honest. A lot of the reading has been related to work, and I do enjoy those things, but not as much as the sit down and read at the house stuff. But I'm glad I carved out some time to read the book that we're going to talk about today. So I've read that one over the summer, and there have been a few kind of short novels that I've been able to tap into over the last year.
So when we talked to you about Stephen King, obviously he's kind of a horror writer. What is your favorite genre? Is it horror or is it more fantasy like this book that we're getting ready to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's an even split, and I guess the reason why I say that is, for me, the horror, I don't enjoy horror just for the sake of it being horrific. It is that fantasy element, I think, that kind of wraps me into those books. I really like kind of the grim, dark side of fantasy, so those high-stakes moments where, the author can kind of build you up and take something away from you and do that over and over again. So in that way, I think fantasy would be my favorite kind of overall genre. And I would almost put horror as kind of a subcategory of that for me.
Okay, yeah. So have there been any books that you've wanted to read but you haven't had the time for yet?
Oh, definitely. You two probably know this better than anyone, but the list gets long, and it seems like
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the time that you think you're going to set aside to take care of those want to read seems to never show up or not show up all the time. But I'm looking forward to a book that comes out in October. It's by Joe Hill, who's actually Stephen King's son. It's called King's Sorrow, and I think it'll be a fun kind of Halloween time read for me. And I still need to actually get around to reading Stephen King's latest book. It's called Never Flinch, but it came out in May. But yeah, I'm glad that I dedicated some time over the summer to the Devils, but haven't been able to jump back into the Stephen King stuff.
So let's talk about Joe Abercrombie a little bit. He's best known for the First Law trilogy, The Age of Madness, and the Shattered Sea trilogy. Which ones have you read?
Yeah, so the First Law and the Age of Madness trilogies, I would say, are probably, if I had to group together books into kind of big story arcs, they're probably my 6 favorite books of all time. Those 2 trilogies are written in the same universe, and so there's kind of this nice continuity to the story, and the themes are really fun. That's kind of what got me hooked on the Abercrombie style. And like I mentioned before, I really like the kind of morally gray characters with kind of that gritty, cynical world, because it makes you think, right? It makes you kind of see things through different lenses. And yeah, so coming to the Devils, the book we're going to talk about today, it was interesting because for me, I had this anticipation of like a typical Joe Abercrombie book, but this was not that for me. And I'm looking forward to talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. We should make note, Lasha did not read this book.
No, I did not.
I do think, Lasha, I did put down in my notes, though, that you would appreciate this man's writing. There were just so many lines that I highlighted. It's edgy, it's hilarious, very layered. One just little nugget on page 127, it said, you can hate a shipmate and still row the same way. But those little nuggets were everywhere in this book.
Yeah.
So,
well, that part does sound like something I would like, but the fantasy thing isn't, it's not my genre.
Sure.
Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, I think if I were to think back, even just 10 years ago, if you were to pressure me and say, what's a book that you think you'd read at the same time as your mom talk about? This would not this would not have been that book, certainly.
Correct. Right. So I am over 50. I consider myself a Christian woman. And this writer, he's phenomenal. I'm going to say maybe the king of fantasy because he made me love devils. Crazy. Crazy. Would have never thought it. It is fast-paced. It's full of unexpected heart. So don't let those monsters fool you because they just might win you over.
That's right.
So we are talking about the devils today. So I will read a short synopsis. So this is as much of the book that I will have read so far. So Brother Diaz has been summoned by the sacred city where he is certain a grand holy assignment awaits him, but his new flock is made up of monsters. But the mission he is tasked with will require bloody measures from them all in order to achieve its righteous end. Elves lurk at our borders and hunger for our flesh, while greedy princes care for nothing but their own ambitions and comfort. With a hellish journey before them, it's a good thing Brother Diaz has the devils on his side.
I know we're going to have some spoilers.
Probably.
Okay, so I put down that this novel delves into themes of redemption, faith, and the struggle between good and evil, suggesting that virtues can be found even in unexpected places. Would you agree with that, Shane?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think after having read the book, one of the main kind of themes is this idea of first, can monsters, quote monsters, right? Can they be redeemed? Like, have you ever done anything that's unredeemable? But then also, I think there's this kind of, I guess, angle to it of, what are monsters? And kind of the monster is in the eye of the beholder a little bit. And I kind of like the spin on the title of the book because the devils, it works on a couple of different levels, right? Because when you start reading, I think you initially think, oh, the devils, that's the quirky necromancer and the vampire werewolf and the knight, all these kind of otherworldly creatures. But Joe does a fun thing, which is in the middle of this book, and sorry to ramble here, but I think there's a scene where the devils a couple of them, are watching something take place between two groups of, what we would call humans, or the, quote, good guys. And they ask themselves, or one of them comments, and they call us monsters, or they call us devils, right? And it's really interesting to look at the world through the eyes of the bad guys, I guess in quotes, and see them perceive what the world looks like to them.
Right. I do agree with you completely on that.
And I think, like, as an example, like, who's really worse in the story? Like, if you were to cast judgment, is it the, centuries-old vampire who chooses to go protect this person on this little quest, or is it the Grand Duke Michael who, he lies to everyone and puts someone in danger? And, it's just such an interesting little back and forth between who's good and who's bad.
I agree. So let's talk about Alex a little bit. She was a little bit of a street rat, a thief. And in the very beginning of the book, it had her in the marketplace running from some people. And I told you, I felt like that beginning scene was a bit of an Aladdin moment. She was asked to do things that she wasn't really ready to do. Have you ever been in that situation where you've been put into a position to lead and you just weren't ready?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think just kind of due to what I do for work, and I guess at home as well, I don't know that I've ever been thrown into a situation where I wasn't ready to take on the challenge of leadership, but that doesn't mean that I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, being a parent.
I was just about to say, yeah, exactly. My oldest daughter, born the first semester of my when I started my graduate degree, and so just, was I, quote, ready for that? I mean, no, but certainly was ready for the challenge of that. And same with, taking on this career, and mentorship is a big piece of what I do. And my students will tell you that, I'm changing all the time, right? So you're always learning how to do it. And I think the kind of parallels with Alex are fun because if she didn't have the devils, when she got to Troy, she probably wouldn't have been ready to do the things that she's planning to do.
I
And
agree
so
with
I
that
think
too.
part of that journey is, learning the lessons from Brother Diaz and from Baron Rickard, the cast of devils.
So Abercrombie, he uses satire and exaggeration to critique political and religious hypocrisy. How did that hit with you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the other 6 books that I mentioned, and I've read more of his standalones as well, and that is the thing that draws me to him, is just highlighting, he uses settings that are close to the world we live in so we can relate to them, but then flushes them with these exaggerated examples, turning something that's moderately bad into some heinous crime, or really stretching out and highlighting those little, even if it's a small hypocrisy, really blowing it up into something that's fun to read about. So I think that's kind of woven throughout the story. And for me, it's a highlight.
I thought there were a couple times that he was getting ready to cross the line in my mind, but then he did a really good job of straddling the line, I thought. But that was just from this mom's point of view.
Yeah, I mean, this book he does this where he'll test your tolerance for, I guess, what I would call raw humor. And I guess to get into the humor piece a little bit, I'm sure you're going to ask me soon what I thought of this book, and I think you can tell from my responses that I liked it. But this was kind of if there was a letdown, this was it. And that is that this book for me felt more like a comedy than it did like that grim, dark tragedy that I'm used to from him. So the humor is everywhere. I mean, I would say
yes.
even with a serious moment, right? Something tragic happens. Someone still makes like a quirky, funny comment. And, for me, those didn't hit quite as well. But yeah, as far as walking the line, I think this one is not for everyone. If you don't enjoy kind of the raw, gritty humor where most subjects are involved, right? No subject is off limits. Yeah, it'll test your tolerance for that for sure.
That's funny, Shane, because your reply right now just makes it sound more like something I would read as far as fantasy then, because of the humor in it, rather than keeping it so dark and serious. Maybe I could get through it if it were.
Oh, it's funny.
It's funny.
It is funny.
If there's a Joe Abercrombie book that I would recommend for you, Lasha, to read first, it's got to be this one based on that response, because his other ones are, downright depressing.
Yeah,
at times.
no, I would not like that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, sometimes quite brutal.
So let's talk about the squad. Who was your favorite character?
Oh, goodness. They're all great. Let me just say that. He does a really nice job of giving them all kind of their quirks and their voice. Dialogue is something that Joe Abercrombie is known for, so he does a really good job of, you can kind of read these endless conversations so easily. And again, he gives these characters kind of their own voice. Before I tell you who my favorites were, and maybe my least favorites, I do think that overall the squad was a bit shallow for me. So they felt more like kind of those stereotypical archetypes. Like, you can find the archetype of that character in a lot of different stories. Whereas from his other trilogies, you really get the sense that that they're real people with really unique kind of, high stakes and investments and things. So I didn't get that from this group, but it was still really fun to discover kind of how the devils were kind of crafted and given flaws. And I think for me, Sunny probably became my favorite. She was not my favorite in the first half of the book. In fact, I didn't enjoy reading the parts of the story with Sunny in the first half of the book. But for the second half, I think she by far was the one that I was really happy to see show up in a chapter.
Sunny was absolutely my favorite. We'll go through the whole list of characters here in a minute, but one thing that came about from Sunny, she had that monogrammed handkerchief. She thought it felt elegant, but I loved when she said without a monogram, it was just a cloth. I liked that. Just kind of added a little charm to the moment.
So let's go down the lineup of these characters whom I'm not familiar with in any way at all. So I've just got a list here. We have Alex. I know you've kind of talked about Alex a little bit already. Anything else to add?
Her twist at the end was my favorite plot point. There are some twists that I saw coming from a mile away, but that one, her revealing the secret that she's been keeping, I thought that was really fun. And I thought it added a lot of complexity if you think back to the story now through that new kind of revelation that she gives you. Yeah, I liked her. If there was one character that I thought did have the complexity that I was looking for, it was Alex.
I liked her as well. And I think the monsters became her people. They became like a family, honestly. I enjoyed Alex.
I agree.
Okay. What about Vigga?
Vigga, yeah. So Vigga is she's like a Viking werewolf, right? Like I don't know how else to say it. She's a Viking who turns into a werewolf. And so she's everything that comes with that, right? All the stereotypes. She's terrifying and, commits these kind of atrocities but there's a deep sense of regret that she has. And I think for her, one of the things that hits me is she's the way she is for reasons that she couldn't control, right? Like she didn't choose that life. And in fact, throughout the whole book, you kind of see her dealing with trying to fight away that side of her, which even as, stereotypical as a werewolf is in that sense, I thought that they did a decent job, or Joe did a decent job of kind of crafting her into that space. So I did like Vigga. I thought she was fun to read about.
I liked her. I felt like she was the spicy of the story. She hated seafood. I related to that. She had tattoos covering her body to warn people that she was dangerous. And I'm sure that wasn't something she chose either. But I do want to talk about the don't hoard your nutshells. So Vigga didn't think about the past much. The past was nutshells. Once they are cracked off, what use are they? Toss them away and walk on. Don't hoard your nutshells. That was kind of her philosophy, and I loved that.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit split on whether I kind of like that philosophy or not, because for Vigga, I think that her nutshells, as she put it, were terrible things. Her past was not something that she dwelled on or wanted to dwell on because it gave her those memories that were really painful for her, right? I mean, she lost everything. Whereas, my past has not been quite as bad as Vigga's, so I don't mind holding on to a few nutshells.
Totally fair. I love that as your mother.
Yeah. Okay, moving on, we have Sunny.
Yeah, Sunny's a fun character. Like I said, in the beginning of the story, I kind of thought, oh, he needed another person, so he kind of made this one up as the kind of extra. But she really kind of takes center stage, I thought, in the second half of the book. So Sunny's an elf, and in this world, elves are not seen as good creatures. And so Sunny was a slave to the circus and ends up, serving the church as one of these devils. That's kind of her role. But she kind of highlights this fun thing that Abercrombie does where he gives the character the flaw that keeps them from having the thing that they want. So I think if you ask Sunny what she wants more than anything, it's just to be seen, for people to see her for who she really is. But then what she's good at is blending in. She can be invisible. So the thing that, she has a skill in actually keeps her from realizing the thing that she wants. So she's a fun character. And then her and Alex really kind of hit it off towards the second half of the book. And I thought that was a fun kind of banter between those two characters.
I put down that she was quiet but deadly. I think without her, they wouldn't have won half the battles. She did deal with that prejudice, like you said. And I thought she was very loyal. And I said she was selfless.
There's a scene, it's one of my favorites, where they are they're in this big battle and kind of the odds seem against them a little bit. And you have her invisible sneaking around sabotaging all the bad guys
Yes.
while everyone's talking. And I loved it because you could, as the reader, you're seeing the things that are going to happen ahead of time, which was fun, I think. Yeah, I really like that scene. I do wonder if you noticed something in the book, Mom, because I think it's a fun little depth piece to Sunny. So we haven't talked about the binding. The reason these devils are helping Alex get to her, destination is because the Pope has bound them. And if they fight that binding, they become nauseated and sick. And, one of the characters that we'll talk about in a minute really, really fights that. Sunny, throughout the entire book, does not fight the binding one time. And we find out from Baron Rickard, who's a vampire, that he wasn't bound at all because he doesn't have a soul. And the binding only affects creatures who have a soul. And I wonder if you noticed that when Sunny went back to Troy, not towards the holy city, so she broke the binding, she started to feel sick, which is fun because it implies that elves
have a soul.
Although the humans don't, even though the humans don't think they do, it seems like the elves have souls, which is a pretty interesting spin. And I wonder if it shows up in the next books that Joe puts together.
I did not put that together until just now, but when you said it, I had a little bit of hair on my arm stick up like, oh.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think he's going to play with that a little bit, and I think it'll be fun to see how it goes.
Okay. It looks like our next character is Baptiste.
Yeah, poor Baptiste, right?
Yes.
So when I was reading the book, what I was imagining about from Baptiste was kind of this like pragmatic pirate kind of character. She was fun to read. She was not one of the characters that really stuck out as one of my favorites, but she was kind of the glue, I guess, that maybe held the crew together, kind of one of the originals. But yeah, there weren't too many moments for me in the book where I just thought, yeah, like I'm really invested in Baptiste as a character.
I just put down that she said that she'd done everything. Like if somebody had done it, she'd done it as well. One of those.
Yeah. I know people like that.
Yeah. If true, if true, she's lived a pretty incredible life.
These are all females so far.
Until now. The next one is not.
Okay. So our next character is Balthazar.
Oh, Balthazar. Oh, man. This guy, he's the character that when I saw he was in a chapter, I went, not again, right? He annoyed me to no end. So he's a magician, and he made it very clear to everyone that he was a magician. For me, he's the one that was trying to, he always needed the credit. He needed to feel like he mattered, and he needed to feel like he was important. Part of me wonders kind of if Abercrombie's going to get around to telling us why that is. But yeah, because of that, he kind of had this general sense of just being very cocky. I don't tend to enjoy those people in the real world, so I did not enjoy him on the pages of the book either.
He was my least favorite. One thing he did do, though, that was funny, he made dead things dance or fight. That was kind of humorous in the book. And when he was trying to break the Pope's binding, he made a list of supplies that he needed. And that list very much to me looked like a list of a kid going to Hogwarts, what they would buy to go to school.
Yeah, the dark arts list and him trying to, Yeah, there were certainly some scenes in the book that he was the central character, and they were good scenes. I don't want to make it seem like those story plot lines weren't good. I just didn't like his dialogue because it was annoying to me.
Yes.
But like him making two heads talk to each other like walkie-talkies, for example.
Oh, hilarious. I can't wait to talk about that. That was crazy.
Yeah, hilarious.
Okay, are we ready?
We're ready.
Ready to move on. Then we have Brother Diaz.
Brother Diaz. So Brother Diaz was kind of another character that reminded me of Alex's plotline, where was more or less told he was going to do something that he certainly didn't think he was ready for. So he's kind of he's the leader of this band of devils, and his responsibility is to have them get Princess Alexia or Alex to Troy. So he's kind of like, I guess you would say, in charge, kind of. But he was also one of those characters that grew on me over time. In the first half of the book, he doesn't do anything particularly remarkable. And then by the end of the book, I really liked Brother Diaz. I thought that he learned to stand on his own 2 feet. He gained a lot of confidence. And kind of like Alex, I think he started to really get a sense of family among the group of devils. And yeah, I think he's going to play a pretty central character role as things progress.
I could not agree more.
And what about Jakob of Thorn?
He's a fun character, right? So the whole premise is that he's lived for centuries. He's been cursed by a witch where he can never die. And so, it's a fun character to play with. I will say he did kind of ruin some of the tension for me, because anytime he was involved in a one-on-one fight, we knew he was going to win.
Right.
No matter what, right? It was kind of not something you needed to guess about. And that's also a theme as to why maybe this book won't rate as high as I wanted it to, which is, the stakes just never felt like they were big enough. If he was in a fight, he was always going to win. And it seemed like if one of the other devils wasn't there, they were going to show up last minute and take over in the battle. But Jakob is another one of those characters that seems to be kind of the leader of the group. He's got a lot of good one-liners, a lot of kind of philosophical one-liners that makes you think. I enjoyed him as a character.
Do you remember the scene where he's going up all those stairs and it's just painful for him to, take one more step? Well, that made me think of when you went hiking with your dad and I in Arkansas, and I was struggling to climb the peaks. I felt like I was very much like Jakob.
And I think that it's a fun thing to think about, right? Because he's obviously very old. He's lived for a long, long time. Not only that, but he's died, quote, died multiple times. So the wounds that he's had to heal through are, the worst you can imagine. And yet he's forced to function in the world. So I think it's again, one of those fun character plot lines where, would you want to have to do that is kind of the question I kept asking myself. Like, does he want to climb those stairs?
Probably not.
He sure made it sound like no. Yeah, he sure made it seem like no.
And now we have Baron Rickard.
Yeah, Baron Rickard he was one of my favorites throughout the whole book. I thought his dialogue was very funny, and his banter with Balthazar was hilarious. And then finding out at the end that he did it all voluntarily, and some of the motivation behind that, I just enjoyed him the whole time. And yeah, vampires are fun, so I don't really have anything bad to say about Baron Rickard.
When we first met him, he was old and decrepit, but as it said he had a drinking problem. As he was able to drink, he would get youthful and young again, and I thought that was crazy. I also put down that he was powerful, cunning, but deeply dangerous.
Yeah, the cunning part, right? He has his drinking problem. He gets more and more youthful, but then when he starts talking about his dumplings, you start to see gray hair show up.
Yes.
And you start to see bags under his eyes. But when he's talking about his dumplings, everyone seems to kind of do whatever he says. So very powerful, kind of that sit in the background, kind of puppeteer style character, which, yeah, one of my favorites.
So were there any characters, Shane, that you just couldn't stand?
Yeah, Balthazar, like I said, and maybe through the next couple of books, right, he'll have some redemption in there. His dialogue was not my favorite. One of his scenes where he's the primary, hero, I guess we'll say, he lets the bad guy go, and I'm like, what are you doing? So he does a few things where I wasn't too thrilled with Balthazar, and I'm going to forget his entire name, which is maybe on point because he's very upset with people who forget his entire name, but I do not remember it.
What moment do you think was the true climax of this story?
It has to be that final confrontation in Troy, right, where Alex learns that Duke Michael, who she, knows as her uncle, is really the one who kind of led her into danger, and his hope was that she wouldn't survive that danger. So I think that the realization that she's been played was, for me, kind of the oh my goodness moment.
I thought the same.
Yeah. I did see that coming. I saw Duke Michael coming. I also saw Lady Severa being Eudoxia. I saw that coming from a mile away. I'm glad it was I'm glad it happened. It was a fun storyline, but it wasn't very well hidden for me. As soon as they started talking about how Empress Eudoxia was conducting experiments on herself, I thought immediately, oh, she's turned into someone else, right? And she's fascinated by the soul. So, oh, she's moved her soul to someone else. And Lady Sever just kind of fit that bill for me. So I wasn't surprised, but I thought Alex seeing that happen was a big piece of the story. And everything kind of fits into place once that happened.
Once again, like Harry Potter, it felt like Voldemort's Horcruxes, moving the soul. That's what it reminded me of. So let's talk about a couple of these settings. First, let's talk about the illusionist house and the talking heads. You and I kind of texted about this because you're like, just wait, just wait.
Well, and we didn't want to, I like that right now we're really having our first conversation about the book as a whole. So we didn't want to, spoil it before we hopped on the podcast. But yeah, that was one where I was like, oh, you're about to hit a chapter that's just, it's pretty on point for what the book is all about. And that was definitely one of them.
And those, I think it was a couple chapters that they were in that house, very dizzying for me. Like, I remember thinking, what in the world is happening?
Yeah, and I think I've criticized Abercrombie a little bit in this because, and it's not because of his writing, it's because the book isn't what I wanted from an Abercrombie book. But those chapters, they reminded me that, like, he really does a nice job of being an artist in his writing. There's one chapter where the whole point of this house that they're in, the illusionist house, is that they're walking in circles. And in the chapters, there's a chapter that starts the exact same way as one of the previous chapters. I kid you not, I had to go back and check and make sure I hadn't lost my place.
Right.
Because he had confused me. I felt like I was in the illusionist house. So he did a really cool job, I thought, with that sequence. And then, using talking heads as walkie-talkies. I'm not sure how you criticize
That's
that.
pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. I put down in my notes that my head was spinning. So what about the battle at sea with the crabmen?
It was, of all the battles, it was probably my least favorite setting. And I don't know why. There wasn't anything necessarily wrong with the setting, but yeah, just, a nice little boat battle. Nothing crazy, nothing that stood out to me anyway.
Whereas I felt like it was a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean vibe, a little bit.
I like that.
Yeah. And then there was the Sorcerer Twins at St. Sebastian.
Yeah, I thought they were kind of the fun, I guess, the big bad guys without being the big bad guys. They obviously stood a challenge, and I thought at St. Sebastian's, again, I thought the setting for that was really fun to read through. I go back to, I never felt like anything bad was going to happen, though, because by that point in the book, anytime there was a stress, someone came to save the day. And most of the time you knew who that person was going to be, right? Like whoever had stayed behind or whoever wasn't in the scene, you knew that as soon as things got rough, that person was going to show up and everything was going to be okay. So I wish there was a little more of the high stakes, big loss type stuff that I'm used to from him. But it was a good scene. I thought the battle was fun.
So Shane, do you think that this book could make it as a movie?
I think that this book is probably one of the most likely to be a movie of all of Joe's books. And it would have to be done the right way, though. I think it kind of would lend itself to more of that, like, superhero, big fights, kind of less of a dark horror, slow thriller movie, and more of that kind of, again, superhero, big battles type of a movie. And I think that the comedy in there would be a really fun thing to throw onto the screen. I think that people would enjoy that because not only are you going to get the dialogue humor, but I think the visualization of some of the funny moments would be fun. It is at its core kind of that classic band of misfits who have to take a MacGuffin from point A to point B. So It's not like it's going to twist anyone or make anyone scratch their head. But I do think that it would make a good movie, a fun, enjoyable movie.
And what scenes do you think would just absolutely need to make the cut? They need to be in there.
I think that the ambush by Duke Marcian, I think is how you would say his name. It was the first, is at the inn when they get ambushed right at the beginning of their journey, when they didn't know that people knew Alexia was on her way. So I thought that would make for a really cool opening scene where you don't even know who the good and bad guys are, but Duke Martian shows up and there's this ambush because it's also your first introduction to Vigga as a werewolf. And I think that that would be a really fun, kind of powerful way to start the movie. And then I also do think the fight with Duke Sabas, which is at that ruined abbey, the two werewolves fighting each other would make for some pretty good on-screen action.
Well, we can just hope that some movie producers are listening to this podcast.
That's
right.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And then we better see your name in the credits, too.
Yeah. You know, every character seems to have kind of their scene where their skills are shown off. One of my favorite scenes, which is not action at all, was when Brother Diaz was lawyering all the oligarchs and was just going through the ledgers and telling them how wrong they were about what they thought they were owed. So, yeah, I think, you know, it may not make great film, but I thought that that scene was another, you know, kind of key part that shows off the powerful side of Brother Diaz.
I thought that Abercrombie throughout the book walked a fine line. This book is both violent at times, but it's so hilarious.
You having only read this book of his, I think the humor's great. And like I mentioned before, I do think it kind of tests your tolerance for certain themes. But yeah, I love Abercrombie's dark humor, but it felt a little less than what I was after from some of his previous books. But yeah, no, it was good. It was good. I don't find myself being offended by works of fiction. And so for me, it's all fair game.
Well, you've already said this one might be a good one for me to read of this author because it's not as dark and depressing as a lot of his novels. You know, who would you recommend this book to?
If you like stories that lean on classic structure, so like I said, Band of Misfits, taking the MacGuffin from point A to point B, and you're okay reading a book knowing that it's going to be a pretty linear story, right? You know what's going to happen in the book by about chapter 5. As long as you're okay with that, I think you'll really enjoy just the writing of Joe Abercrombie, even if the story isn't what you wanted, because it is funny. It also introduces someone to the fantasy world without the happy-go-lucky, you know, not to make fun of Hogwarts, but it's a little more, it's a little more gritty than the way that Harry Potter is written.
That's such a hard question to even answer who you would recommend it to, because you probably would not have recommended that to me. And yet, I'm going to be honest here, Shane, it's probably been my favorite read of 2025. I enjoyed it that much.
Wow.
I know.
That's awesome.
And I didn't expect that. It was very unexpected.
I would not have recommended it to you before I read it. I still would not have recommended it to you after I read it.
Correct. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of after having read it, the reason I wouldn't have recommended it to you is it is that line of what is funny, right? And when does funny become too much? And he does get awfully close to things that I would imagine you feeling are, easy.
Yes, there were a couple times I'm like, don't go there.
Yep. But yeah, I think the characters are relatable. They just didn't have the depth I wanted, which is fine. I thought the story was a good story. It was just a predictable story. It's an easy read. He writes it so well. The dialogue is so good. Yeah, I think it's a fun read. It's not going to blow your mind with the twists and turns that some other books might, but I think that it certainly itches that kind of fantasy-esque plotline for me.
Yeah. So, Lanie, did you think that it was an easy read?
It's a long book.
It is long.
But it was so enjoyable. With each chapter, you're on the edge of your seat, I thought. So I enjoyed every minute of it.
I think that one challenge that you may take on is to grab one of his other books and see how many chapters you can get through. Because I think in terms of like you saying you're on the edge of your seat, in his other books, so many good and so many bad things happen over and over again that you never know what's going to happen. He has no problem getting rid of main characters in his other stories. Okay. And it's a wild ride. And so in this one, I know there are a few little spots, but in this one I felt generally safe while I read it. So even though it was gritty, it felt more like that happy-go-lucky type fantasy for me. So it'd be interesting to see if your scale changed a little bit.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, both of you. What would you rate it?
I'll let you start, Mom.
I'm going to give it a 5.
Whoa.
I really enjoyed it. I did.
And see, I'm going to give it a 3. And
Okay.
yeah. And you'll have to remind me what the, Book Barn 3 means in
It's
your
good.
guys' language. But
Good.
okay.
Just good. Most of our books
think-
are 4s, a little better than good. But
Yeah.
I can't say it's my favorite read of 2025 and not give it a 5.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think the more I read the book, the less I liked it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the only reason why is because you bought me the book for my birthday. And when I was like, oh, yes, a new Joe Abercrombie book. And you have to remember, I've had 6 of his books, more than that, because I've read his standalones. I was ready for that. And so by the time I got halfway through it, I was like, oh, this is clearly not going to be that for me, which is fine. It was good for other reasons. But yeah, so that's why it's a 3 out of 5, because his other books for me are just, those are my 5s. And this just wasn't that for me.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that if you're skeptical of jumping into a genre like grimdark fantasy, this book would be a great place to start. And if you decide you don't like it, I'm sure that someone would take it off of your hands.
Shane, thank you for joining us. That was so fun. I can't wait till next year to see what we're going to read together.
Yeah, sounds great. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, honey.
Well, that was fun.
I always love it when I get to read alongside my kids and my husband or whoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, make sure that you check out our Facebook page, the Book Barn Book Club. Check there for episode releases and the links to those. And we will see you next time here in the Book Barn. I'm Lasha.
And I'm Lanie. And don't hoard your nutshells.